we cannot believe that who God is of no real consequence. We also cannot fail to remember that God is more than what we've made him out to be in the last however many decades. God is more than just the loving, meek, and mild being who is benevolent. We need to remember that God is also holy and righteous, and none of us are holy enough to stand in his presence. Moses, when he went up on the mountain, could not look directly at the face of God. Why not? Because to do so would kill him. Thus, when God showed himself each time, it has been in a cloud. Something that you can't see through real easily. It isn't until we come into his presence for eternity that we will see him as he truly is. We need to let go of the idea that our religious faith should make us comfortable all the time. We are so desiring to be comfortable that we would rather have a gospel that is watered down, scriptures that are watered down, so that God is always looking like a big, fluffy, stuffed animal. We want our scriptures to be read in such a way that we are justified in holding on to our comfort, our apathy, and our slothful religious lives. We do not want to be reminded that God has expectations upon our life, to be lifted up into his presence. We don't want to be reminded that we're not always called to follow the same things that society does. Our God and the faith given to us by Jesus Christ is countercultural in many ways, calling us to care for people beyond what society would, to lay down our lives for our faith, to stand over against culture and society when it's not in keeping with the teachings of God. But we don't want anybody to look at us as radicals. We need to remember that in the transfiguration of Jesus Christ, in the transfiguration of Moses, God gave something that was to be permanent. To Moses, he gave the commandment, what would lead and guide the people of Israel. In Jesus, we were given a king, permanent and total. In that little segment that says, "This is my beloved Son with whom I am well pleased, listen to him," we are given a passage very similar to Psalm 2, verse 7, which was understood to be used to install kings. You see, in the transfiguration of Jesus Christ, it wasn't just a prophet. It wasn't just a teacher. It wasn't just the person leading 12 men and numerous other followers into a new way of life. It was the installation of a king. The king. When we come into the presence of God and we are transformed, we are changed from our sinful selves into a child of God. Permanent, total, whole. And we will be transformed. But the part that I love the best is that little thing that says, "Listen." I used to consider myself a very good listener. Now I struggle to make sure that I listen without interrupting. I need to sometimes be reminded by God that I am to stop and listen, so that I might hear what he has to say for us. As I was preparing for today, I was reminded of a person that I worked with and spent a very, very short period of time with, who was transformed, transfigured, whose face shone. It was a number of years ago, and you've heard me tell this story. I was at Messiah College, and there was a group there having one of their conferences, very similar to our annual conference. And the woman was there for this conference. She was in a wheelchair. She had MS and hadn't been able to walk for some time. If she got up, she had to have people carry her. And she went to a worship service one evening, and I was the dorm host waiting for people to come back to make sure they had all they needed, towels and sheets and soap and everything else. She came back in, and the room literally got brighter. And when she was wheeled in, I said, "You were dancing tonight." And with the big grin on her face, she had a slight shocked look, and she said, "How did you know?" I said, "Because your face is shiny." She said, "We were worshiping, and one of the pieces of music came on, and I felt God tell me to get up and dance, and so I got up, and with several other folks, I danced. No one was holding her up. She was just holding hands, and she danced." She said, "I'm back in my chair, but I danced to worship my God." And the next day, she was still telling people, "I danced. God allowed me to worship Him in dance." She was transformed, and she had a message to tell, and she wasn't afraid to tell it. How many of us have been transformed because we have been in the presence of God? How many of us have listened to the voice of God so that we could be transformed? And those of us who have experienced transformation, how many of us are talking about it? You see, we are the light of the world. We have been given by God to a world that is filled with those things that tell us there's darkness. We know of folks who have suffered losses and feel that they are lost and in darkness. But when we turn on the radio, when we turn on the news, when we turn on the television, we hear of war, we hear of famine, we hear of displacement, we hear of racism, we hear of all of these things happening in our world today. And I want to know, are we the light of the world, or are we going to allow these things to darken people's lives? Have we gone up into the presence of God and been transformed? And are we willing to come down off the mountain, because the reality is the Son of Man has been raised from the dead. We have nothing to tell but the truth. We have nothing to hide. There is nothing to be kept secret. So as we come down from the mountain, are our faces shining? And are we telling people? We could summarize it like this. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let your light so shine